Hi, Rebecca.
Hello.
Thank you for being here today. So I wanted to ask you about your book right there. I hope you fall in love. It's a series of poetry that you made yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my first question is, what or who inspired you to write poetry?
So I started writing mostly with stories. I used to try to write novels. They didn't go very well. But I didn't start writing poetry until I joined Power Writers in high school. And it was a writing group that aimed to get people writing as a way of counseling and as a way of furthering education. And so in that group, I started with very bad poetry, and I will never show that journal to anyone. But the longer I wrote, the better, at least I felt, my poetry became. And I definitely felt like they inspired me to write poetry at all, where I would have just stuck with stories.
So how did you come about getting published?
So publishing actually was a way out for me. I was planning on going to study abroad for 2 weeks in Oxford, and I couldn't afford it. It was at least $10,000 just for 2 weeks. Now, yes, that was all expenses paid. That included dorming and food and everything, but I still couldn't afford it. So aside from my savings, I decided everyone knew that I write and that I wrote. And so I thought by doing self-publishing, I could sell the book as a way of fundraising. And it worked pretty well. I actually used CreateSpace, which is Amazon run. So the book automatically goes up onto Amazon.com, but I personally buy bulks of the book and sell them that way.
So you were talking about how you had the whole campaign to get to Oxford. How was that experience, and what was the toughest part about reaching that goal?
Oh, the experience itself was absolutely amazing. At first, I thought I was gonna go and spend 3 days with a friend that would come with me, and then I would go and do the program for 2 weeks. But what ended up happening was I went by myself to another country for the first time in my life, and it was a very surreal experience to be able to get on a plane and know I'm crossing the Atlantic Ocean by myself with no one waiting for me on the other side. But it was an amazing experience. It was my first time traveling outside of the United States.
Oh, really?
Yes, so it was very scary. But the hardest part, I would say, is my first day in London. And I had no idea where I was going. I had no idea how to work the tube. And so I spent that whole time just trying to figure out what was I supposed to do and how to figure out my way around it, because I had to do it on my own.
So you're a New Yorker through and through. What was it like coming back from London, and what were some of the biggest differences in regards to culture, people, and maybe even the architecture?
Oh, well, the architecture is absolutely completely different. From New York City, you feel like you're in a glass castle all the time, or at least it's brick and mortar with all of our places in the Bronx. But when I was in Oxford, specifically the city of Oxford, everything is culture and history and architecture. The bar that I would go to every night was built in 1290.
Wow.
So these were places that had been there longer than America was even there, and we were just going there to hang out. So it's very fun to go, and coming back, I felt automatically I wanted to leave again. It felt like it wasn't enough to be here anymore. As much as New York City is the greatest city in the world, it wasn't enough.
I completely understand. What would you say are your top 3 or 5 poems in your book?
Oh, so definitely my new favorite F word. That's definitely one of them. I love my introduction, actually. It's not considered a poem, but that piece was more important to me than anything else. And speaking about anxiety to my sister. And that piece is important to me because of my family specifically.
Do you plan to publish another book? And if so, would you make it another collection of your poetry or something story-based?
So my next project is I'm trying to gather a bunch of artists and poets, and we're trying to create an anthology of all of our work, including personal essays, the stories of our lives. And that would be a way to give publishing opportunities to people who normally wouldn't be able to have them. And we'll do it in a way that we can sell it to our friends and families, and it'll put something on our resumes, add it to our portfolios.
That's awesome. I know you're a participant of National Novel Writing Month, or
Yeah.
NaNoWriMo for short. Would you consider making one of your NaNoWriMo stories into a full-on book?
Yes, so I normally tend to use Nano to actually do the first draft of the books that I want to publish, because otherwise I'll never actually finish them, honestly.
I agree. So is your book still available for sale, and if so, where can people find it?
Yes, so it's still available for sale for $15 on my website. I generally suggest. It's RebeccaYSPerez.com, and there I sign and personally send out all of the books.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rebecca, for doing this interview for me.
Thank you.
And yeah, cut.